I was halfway through reviewing the quarterly projections when Grant Caldwell barged into my office without so much as a knock. No courtesy, no pause. Just a loud, deliberate entrance meant to unsettle anyone sitting on the other side of the desk. Typical Grant. He tossed a folder onto my keyboard like it was trash he was returning to the bin.
"We need to talk. Now," he barked.
I raised my eyes from the screen, first at the folder, and then at the man I'd reported to for nearly 4 years. Grant Caldwell. Chief Operating Officer. Office tyrant. And the kind of man who only acknowledged women in the workplace when he needed coffee, coordination, or compliance. He liked control, and more than that, he liked reminding people that he had it. But as always, I stayed calm. I had learned early that Grant thrived on reactions. "Of course," I said softly, gesturing to the chair across from me. He didn't sit. Instead, he stayed standing, arms folded, looming over the desk like a judge preparing to issue a sentence. "The board has decided to restructure the leadership team," he announced, each word clipped. "We're moving in a different direction, and frankly, we need people who can lead, not just run spreadsheets." I blinked once, letting the words settle. "Are you firing me?" A slow, self-satisfied smirk spread across his face like he had just hit a game-winning shot, even if he'd traveled 3 steps to get there. "Let's not make this dramatic," he said. "We're releasing you from your position, effective immediately. No warning, no performance review, and certainly no acknowledgement of the fact that my division had produced the strongest revenue growth the company had seen in 3 years." "I see," I replied quietly. "May I ask why?" Grant's jaw tightened. "You lack strategic vision. You're a manager, not a leader. And let's be honest, this industry requires assertiveness and confidence, traits you haven't exactly demonstrated." There it was. Not even subtle. A gendered insult wrapped neatly in corporate buzzwords. He had never seen me as a leader, not because I lacked skill or results, but because I didn't fit his outdated blueprint of leadership. Loud, aggressive, male. "I understand," I said, voice calm, steady, neutral. The neutrality seemed to irritate him. He wanted outrage, a gasp, a breakdown, maybe even tears. But I had learned long ago to keep my emotions out of boardrooms filled with fragile egos. "I'll need your badge and company laptop by the end of the day," he added stiffly. "Your access will be disabled at 5 p.m. HR has your severance details." I stood and extended my hand politely. "Thank you, Grant. I appreciate the clarity." He hesitated, then shook my hand. "Good luck out there," he said, as if dismissing a minor inconvenience, not a person. After he walked out satisfied with his little power play, I sat back down and exhaled slowly. My hands didn't shake. My pulse didn't spike. If anything, I felt lighter. Because what Grant didn't know, what no one in the entire building knew, was that I wasn't just a department director. 2 weeks before, something had changed. Something major. And I had been waiting for the right moment to use it. I glanced at the framed photograph on my desk. My mother, standing beside the company's first office on opening day, smiling proudly. She had built this company from nothing, long before Grant's polished shoes ever touched the lobby floor. I ran my fingers along the edge of the frame. "You told me to wait, Mom," I whispered. "Wait until the time was right." I gathered my few personal items. My favorite pen, a ceramic mug from my team, a stack of notebooks filled with ideas that never made it past Grant's desk. Outside, whispers fluttered from cubicle to cubicle. A few colleagues gave me sympathetic glances. Others avoided eye contact completely. They wondered what I had done wrong. The truth? Nothing. I walked out of the building with a polite smile and the sun on my face. They thought the story ended here. But what they really did was give me the green light. I pulled out my phone and sent a single text to my attorney. "It's time. Move forward." The reply came instantly. "Understood. Shareholder meeting can be scheduled within 5 business days." Grant had no idea what was coming. And the next time I walked into that boardroom, it wouldn't be as an employee. It would be as the majority owner. The envelope. 2 weeks before Vincent fired me, I had been sitting in the quiet oak-paneled office of my family's longtime attorney, Harold Stanton. The room smelled faintly of leather-bound books and old paper, the kind of place where secrets lived for decades until the right moment pried them open. Harold sat across from me, adjusting his silver-framed glasses as he slid a thick, cream-colored envelope toward me. My name, Adriana Hale, was written across the front in my father's unmistakable handwriting. "Your father left very specific instructions," Harold said gently. "You were not to open this until your 35th birthday, not a day earlier." I let out a soft laugh, shaking my head. That sounds like him. Dramatic to the very end. But beneath my amusement, curiosity simmered. What could my father possibly have locked away for years? A letter? A message? Some sentimental keepsake? Harold didn't smile back. Instead, he gave me a knowing look, one that held weight, history, and something like warning. "Your father was a visionary, Adriana," he said quietly, "and he trusted you more than anyone else." The way he said it made my breath catch. My father, Daniel Hale, had built Hale Logistics from a rented warehouse and a single truck. After he passed away 5 years earlier, the company shifted. It became colder, more political, more obsessed with numbers than people. Vincent had arrived soon after, packaging charm and ambition in a suit the board adored, while the company's heart slowly drained away. Harold cleared his throat. "Open it when the clock strikes midnight on your birthday, not before." I took the envelope home, placed it on my kitchen counter, and stared at it for 2 weeks. I didn't touch it, didn't shake it, didn't peek. My father had asked for trust. I gave it to him. Then, on the morning of my 35th birthday, sunlight streaming across the kitchen table, I finally broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter and a stack of legal documents bound with a gold ribbon. My father's familiar handwriting curved across the page. "Adriana, if you're reading this, it means you've reached an age where wisdom finally balances ambition. I always knew you would." My throat tightened. "You spent your life working twice as hard to be taken half as seriously. I saw it all, even the moments you hid from me. This company, our family's legacy, it was never meant to be handed to those who shout the loudest. It was meant for the one who understands its soul. You." I blinked away the sudden sting in my eyes. I read the letter again and again. Then I turned to the documents. Trust agreements, notarized records, ownership transfers filed years ago. It took me a moment to process what I was seeing. My father had placed 92% of the company's shares into a private trust under my name. Locked until my 35th birthday. Activated immediately upon opening. 92%. I wasn't just a shareholder. I was the controlling owner, the true decision maker, the person with ultimate authority. My hands trembled as I whispered, "Is this real?" I called Harold immediately. He answered on the first ring. "You've read it, I assume." "Harold," I breathed. "This says I own 92% of Hale Logistics." "You do," he replied calmly. Your father structured the trust so it wouldn't appear in public filings. Ironclad. Undisputable. The board has no knowledge of it. I sank into my chair. Why didn't he activate it sooner? Harold exhaled softly. Your father believed you needed to see the company for what it truly was, to understand the people running it, to know who deserved to stay and who didn't. Those words hit me harder than I expected. I remembered every meeting where Vincent dismissed my ideas, every presentation where my contributions were minimized, every time a male colleague received credit for work I had carried alone. My father had seen all of it coming. He hadn't left me a seat at the table. He had given me the entire table. I straightened. What happens now? We prepare, Harold said. You have full voting rights. We can call a special shareholder meeting at your discretion. Once you choose, the board will have no choice but to comply. Don't notify them yet, I said firmly. A pause. May I ask why? Harold said. I looked toward the window, watching morning traffic glide by, unaware that my life had just shifted beneath my feet. Because when I walk into that boardroom, I said slowly, I want them completely unprepared. I want them to look at me and realize too late what they've done. Harold nodded, understanding the gravity. We set a follow-up meeting for the next morning, and as I hung up the phone, a calm, powerful certainty settled in my chest. Vincent thought he had ended my career, but my father had built a future where I would end his reign instead. The legal preparation, 350 words. The morning after reading my father's letter, I sat across from Harold Stanton again, this time with a steady resolve I hadn't felt in years. The envelope had changed everything, and now it was time to act. Harold placed a stack of documents on the table between us. These are the preliminary filings to initiate a special shareholder meeting, he explained. With your voting rights, the board cannot refuse it. I flipped through the pages, each stamp and signature confirming what my father had orchestrated long before his passing. This wasn't an emotional gesture. It was strategy, calculated, airtight, and decades in the making. We'll also need to prepare a full performance review of the current executive team, Harold continued. If you intend to challenge leadership, you'll want evidence. I don't intend to challenge it, I said softly. I intend to replace it. He gave a small, almost proud smile. Then we'll need more than numbers. That afternoon, Harold arranged a meeting with the trustee who had safeguarded the shares for years, Margaret Ellison, a woman with steel gray hair, sharp eyes, and a memory so precise it felt like a weapon. She slid a well-organized folder in front of me. This, she said, tapping the cover, is everything the board doesn't want seen. Inside were internal reports, anonymous surveys, HR complaints, retention statistics, and budget breakdowns. It was worse than I expected. Employee turnover up 46% in 18 months. Leadership satisfaction at an all-time low. Misallocated funds used for executive perks. Inflated forecasts approved under Vincent's signature. Margaret leaned back in her chair. If the company continues under his direction, it will be underwater within 2 years. I won't let that happen, I replied. Good, she said. Your father trusted you for a reason. Walking out of her office, I felt the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. Not heavy, but grounding, like armor I had finally earned. By the next morning, Harold had drafted the official notice. All we need now, he said, sliding the document toward me, is your signal. I looked down at the signature line, then met his eyes. Not yet, I said. Not until the moment hurts most. Because timing, as my father always said, was everything. The return to the boardroom. Tuesday arrived colder than usual, the kind of crisp morning that sharpened every sound. I reached the office building 10 minutes early, stepping through the front doors with a sense of calm that felt almost surreal. The receptionist, who had seen me escorted out just days earlier, stared in confusion but didn't speak. She didn't need to. This time, I wasn't here as an employee. Upstairs, the boardroom lights glowed behind frosted glass. Voices murmured on the other side, Vincent's included, smooth and confident as always, unaware that his entire world was seconds away from collapsing. Harold Stanton met me by the elevator, a thin folder tucked under his arm. "They think this is the regular quarterly strategy meeting," he said quietly. "Vincent has already started his presentation." "Good," I replied. "Let him finish his opening line." We walked the short hallway together. I smoothed the front of my blazer, inhaled slowly, and opened the boardroom door. The room fell silent instantly. Vincent was standing at the head of the table, mid-sentence, a slide full of projected revenue charts glowing behind him. His expression froze the moment he saw me, like a man spotting a ghost he had personally buried. "Adriana," he said, brows pinching together, "this meeting is for board members only. You shouldn't be here." I smiled politely, stepped fully inside, and placed a thick stack of documents at the center of the long wooden table. "Actually," I said, keeping my voice steady, "this is exactly where I belong." Confusion rippled across the room. A few board members exchanged glances. Others leaned forward. Vincent's jaw flexed. "As I said, this is a board meeting. Employees are not permitted." "I'm not here as an employee," I interrupted gently. "I'm here as the majority shareholder." A heavy, disbelieving silence fell over the room. The oldest board member, Arthur Collins, adjusted his glasses and picked up the top document, scanning the seal, the signatures, the trust filings. His eyes widened. "Is this accurate?" he asked, turning to me. "It is," I said. 92% of the company's shares were placed into a family trust under my name, effective on my 35th birthday. Full voting rights, all notarized and legally binding. Murmurs surged like a wave. Vincent's face went red. "This has to be some kind of mistake," he snapped. "Your father would never—" "He did," I said, my voice firmer now. "Because he trusted me. And because he knew what this company would turn into without oversight." Arthur cleared his throat. "These documents appear legitimate. The board will need to review." "They've already been reviewed," Harold said, stepping forward and handing additional copies to the secretary. "Everything is compliant with corporate bylaws." I pulled another folder from my bag, sliding it across the table with purpose. "Now," I continued, "I'd like to address the leadership of Hale Logistics." Vincent scoffed. "This is ridiculous. You think you can just walk in here and—" I raised a hand slightly, stopping him. "I'm submitting a motion for the immediate removal of Vincent Harrow as Chief Strategy Officer." Vincent lunged forward. "This is a vendetta!" "No," I said calmly. "This is accountability." I opened the folder, revealing charts, audits, HR reports, and financial summaries. Employee turnover up 46%. Declining client retention. 3 pending discrimination complaints. Executive overspending. Inflated forecasts. Misuse of departmental budgets. All under your supervision. A hush filled the room. Not even the air vents seemed to whisper. Vincent shook his head violently. "You're twisting data to make yourself look justified." "I don't need to twist anything," I replied. "The numbers speak for themselves." Arthur folded his hands. "Under company bylaws, the majority shareholder's vote carries the motion alone." Vincent's eyes widened. "You can't do this." "I already have." He stared at me, furious, betrayed, powerless. For the first time in his career, Vincent looked small. Security didn't need to escort him. He walked himself out, shoulders rigid, his world crumbling behind him. When the door closed, I turned back to the board. "This company deserves better," I said softly. "Its employees deserve better. And starting today, that's exactly what they'll get." Arthur nodded slowly. A faint, genuine smile touched his lips. "Welcome to the table, Miss Hale." And for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. Rebuilding the company. The Monday after the shareholders' meeting, I stood at the front of the company's main conference hall, the same place where Vincent once strutted around like a victorious general, boasting about projections he barely understood. But today, the atmosphere was different. Employees entered slowly, their voices hushed, their faces cautious. The front rows were empty, as though no one wanted to seem too hopeful. I waited until the last person settled before I spoke. "Some of you know me," I began. "Some of you only know the version of me you were told." A few uneasy glances exchanged across the room. But let me make something clear. I didn't return to take power. I returned to restore trust. The shift was subtle. Shoulders dropped, eyes softened, tension loosened just enough to breathe. "For years, this company thrived because of you," I continued. "Your ideas, your work, your dedication. Somewhere along the way, that was overshadowed by ego and fear. And that ends today." A quiet murmur spread across the hall. "I'm not here to rewrite history or point fingers. I'm here to make sure the future belongs to all of us, not to a select few who shouted the loudest." I paused, letting the words land. "Yes," I said openly. "I was fired last week, told I wasn't what this company needed, that I lacked leadership." A few people chuckled softly at the irony. I didn't fight back in that moment because I didn't need to. Leadership isn't about noise. It's about responsibility, integrity, and lifting up the people who actually build the company day after day. Heads nodded slowly at first, then steadily. "Starting today," I said, "we rebuild together." And for the next 2 weeks, that was exactly what I did. I didn't hide behind a title. I walked through every department: engineering, customer support, logistics, accounting. I met with team leads, junior staff, interns, receptionists, warehouse workers. I asked what wasn't working. I asked what was broken. I asked what they needed. And this time, someone finally listened. When I met with the customer service department, I immediately noticed something off. Their best team member, Shayla Monroe, had been carrying the entire division while her manager took credit for her ideas. Shayla was sharp, steady, and widely respected unofficially, already doing the work of a leader. So I made it official. She became the new director of client experience. In product development, I met with Caleb Ramirez, a brilliant designer who had resigned months earlier after being repeatedly passed over for promotions in favor of less qualified colleagues. I invited him back personally. "I won't let your talent be wasted again," I told him. He returned the next day. I also addressed HR deeply. I reviewed every pending complaint, many of which had collected dust under Vincent's watch. Patterns emerged quickly. Some managers had been abusing their authority for years. Within 5 days, 3 of them were removed quietly and permanently. Then I launched something my father had dreamed of but never had the chance to implement: the Hale People First Initiative, a company-wide program built on transparency, recognition, and opportunity. No more hidden gatekeeping, no more favoritism, no more silencing good people with bad bosses. The workplace began to change. Laughter returned to the break room. People decorated their desks again. Energy flowed through the halls like fresh air. One evening, as I walked past the engineering bullpen, I noticed a whiteboard someone had scribbled on in blue marker. She brought back the soul. I stopped for a moment, quietly absorbing the words. Not she took power. Not she fired Vincent. She brought back the soul. That was the victory that mattered most. 1 year later. 1 year after taking back Hale Logistics, the company felt almost unrecognizable in the best possible way. The halls buzzed with a steady energy that hadn't been there in years. People weren't rushing out of fear or dragging their feet out of exhaustion. They moved with purpose, pride, ownership. I walked through the building early one morning, coffee in hand, taking in the quiet hum of a company finally breathing again. The data reflected the change. Employee retention up 40%, customer satisfaction climbing month after month, and our revenue line, once flat under Vincent's leadership, now trending upward with momentum we hadn't seen in half a decade. But what mattered even more was the transformation in the boardroom. Half the board members were now women. Several were under 40. They weren't interested in power plays or empty speeches. They asked sharp questions, challenged assumptions, and pushed for decisions based on impact rather than ego. For the first time, the board felt like a team. And as strange as it felt to admit, my father had been right. Timing mattered. If I had stepped into this position years earlier, before the company's culture had hit its breaking point, the change wouldn't have stuck. People needed to see exactly what poor leadership looked like before they could appreciate something better. Now, as I stood outside the executive conference room preparing to present our strongest quarterly report in years, Harold approached with a small smile. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded. "More than ready," I said. And this time, the confidence wasn't forced. It was earned. Vincent's collapse and the illusion of victory. Word of Vincent Harrow's downfall spread through the industry faster than any press release could have managed. At first, he tried to pretend he was unfazed, posting polished photos on LinkedIn, bragging about exciting new opportunities and hinting that he had stepped down by choice. But behind the scenes, the truth unraveled quickly. Executives he once intimidated refused to vouch for him. Recruiters whispered about the internal audit findings. Several companies quietly pulled back after realizing the magnitude of the damage he had caused at Hale Logistics. His polished confidence began to crack, and the industry that once praised him now saw him as a liability. Still, Vincent clung to the illusion of control. He made one last desperate attempt to rally former allies, convinced he could spin the narrative and reclaim a leadership position elsewhere. But without the power he once wielded, and without the loyalty he believed he commanded, his efforts fell flat. Meanwhile, Hale Logistics flourished. The very people he overlooked, dismissed, or silenced were now driving the company's strongest growth in years. His victory had lasted only minutes. The consequences, however, were permanent. And somewhere deep down, I knew the truth. He didn't lose because I won. He lost because he never learned.